Welcome to Frame Dropped. With every reboot and every new iteration of a franchise, games seem to implement more and more RPG elements. They get bigger and longer, let you level up and customize everything. So are all future games morphing into some kind of a single genre, or rather, are all games becoming epic RPGs, and is that a good thing? It seems as more and more games are becoming 50-hour RPGs instead of being linear. It seems that if you want to verify this theory, you just have to take a look at franchises that were linear before, but have drastically changed now. A new Harry Potter action RPG and a Dragon Ball RPG are also rumored, but let's just take a look at games that are already out. Exhibit A, Assassin's Creed. Now this is probably the most obvious one. The Assassin's Creed franchise always mainly consisted of open world games that were highly explorable, and although with time the things that you could do besides the main missions seemed to explode, yes, thank you Assassin's Creed Unity, you may sit down now, the story was still linear and you could complete it in a couple of hours. Since Assassin's Creed Origins, the game has definitely become more RPG. You can upgrade your weapons, your armor, your abilities, and you can't complete the story in just a couple of hours anymore, because every area has a different level, and if you want to survive you need to complete additional tasks until you level up a little bit. Even if you already completed all the main missions in your area. Some people complain that the game has changed so much that it isn't really about Assassin's Creed anymore. Others really enjoy that they can get much more game time for their money. Okay, let's leave it there and talk about Exhibit B, God of War. The original games were vastly different than the critically acclaimed reboot. You could upgrade your health for example, but the older God of War games were designed as hack and slash type games that were just meant to be fun without bothering the player with complicated mechanics. In the new God of War for the PS4, enemies drop different items that are color coded by rarity, armor can be enhanced and crafted and so on. Similar to our first example, this leads to prolonging the overall gameplay time, so the average player needs much more time in order to finish it. Exhibit C, Marvel's Spider-Man. Older Spider-Man games have had an open world for quite a while now, since Spider-Man 2 in 2004 to be exact. And since these games have been open worlds, they also added optional stuff such as helping citizens and stopping crime, but those activities didn't really lead to anything until now. Insomniac's take on the web slinger adds different suits and gadgets and a skill tree. You can level up and need specific materials for crafting stuff, and you get this stuff by completing additional activities, which also leads to this game being much longer than its predecessors. Exhibit D, Red Dead Redemption 2. Now wait a minute, is Red Dead an RPG? Does it really have that many RPG elements? Well, it is long and explorable, you can interact with anyone and the game definitely doesn't hold your hand, but is it really an RPG? Well, for example, you can't level up your strength or armor or whatever and power through high level sections if you just grind enough, and are there even high level sections? If you really think about it, you start to doubt what an RPG really is. So hold that thought and ask yourself what you consider to be an RPG element. For example, if you consider the ability to upgrade your armor, weapons or health as an RPG element, then most games already have those. And I don't mean modern games. The ability to get more health, unlock or upgrade weapons and so on in order to be able to cope with the more difficult endgame enemies is actually a pretty basic concept that existed for a long time if you think about it. It's not that old in this specific form, but was definitely pretty common in the PlayStation 2 era, as in Ratchet & Clank, where you could upgrade your armor, your weapons, your health and even modify some of your weapons. Sure, if you go back to say Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation 1, you can't upgrade anything, you just have your basic attack and that's all. But remember what you probably did when you ran low on lives during the endgame? You returned to an easy early level to gain more lives in order to be prepared. And isn't that some form of grinding? Which is also very much regarded an RPG element. What I'm trying to say is that many of us probably connect the word role-playing game with something bad, something that doesn't fit to other games. I know this because I did this myself. I was never really into JRPGs, and that's what I thought of when I heard the word RPG. Round-based games that nobody understands and where random numbers are flying all over the screen. Of course it's not like that at all, and that's a horrible description of JRPGs, which I can now also enjoy by the way. But I think that's why some of us might think of something negative and therefore dislike the idea that some of their favorite games are becoming more like RPGs. A better word than negative might even be intimidating. Intimidating as in, I don't want to be overwhelmed by all the customizable options where the game might even punish me if I choose a wrong one. I don't want to learn how to play a complicated RPG if I just had to play an easy action game before. But if an RPG just means a massive game with quality content and not a completely hardcore game where everything has to be taken into account before doing anything, then RPG suddenly doesn't sound that horrible anymore. But what obviously happens more and more with modern games is that they borrow gameplay mechanics from other games and it gets harder to define the genre. The reason for this is part to there being less hardware limitations nowadays and part to the fact that developers and publishers want to make longer single-player games. Maybe this is because it gets harder to justify a short single-player experience for $70 that you could finish on a single weekend, in contrast to ever-expanding multiplayer worlds. And if you look at Assassin's Creed again, this might really be the case sometimes, as Ubisoft has publicly stated that their plan is for the average gamer to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey for about 6 months. And it makes sense. Making games gets more and more expensive, and for some, making multiplayer-only games might seem more lucrative. So it's understandable, at least from a business perspective, to make a single-player game interesting for as long as possible in order to make you invest in DLC and additional content. And although this topic is big enough for a whole different video, I would say that this doesn't have to be bad, and it depends on one thing. If the game is 60 hours long, but the additional stuff that you do is interesting and doesn't seem like a chore, then why should we complain? On the other hand, if a game gets prolonged by artificial means, just for the sake of making the game longer, well, I think that's bad. And I think that's what's happening with some games, even the new Assassin's Creed games that have become quite good. You are forced to do side activities in order to have a chance of beating the higher level missions. And some of this stuff seems like copy and paste. Nobody likes to do those, but does it anyways, because it's the only way to progress and you naturally want to progress. But God of War, for example, is the evidence that a longer game can also be achieved by the natural progression of modern gaming and doesn't need to have a different commercial goal other than to sell the base game. God of War meets the criteria of a hybrid genre game, but there isn't nor will there be any DLC. So in conclusion, if you look at all these examples and think about the rumors of the upcoming Dragon Ball and Harry Potter games, it really seems the direction that we're heading is that games are getting bigger and longer and more explorable and borrow more and more elements from different genres. But does it really sound all that bad? And are God of War, Assassin's Creed and Spider-Man really that similar? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a like and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our videos. Until then, see you next time.